Jarvis Thompson's argument for the moral permissibility of abortion is an argument by analogy. What that means is that her argument is not going to focus primarily on situations and scenarios that involve abortion, but instead is going to focus on situations and scenarios that she believes are similar to or analogous to abortion. And the strategy here is that by looking at these non-abortion scenarios, we can discover more easily what the fundamental moral principles are that are underlying those scenarios and situations, and then we can apply those same fundamental moral principles to scenarios involving abortion. So what's one of the scenarios that she presents us with? Well, the first one goes something like this. Imagine that you wake up from an unconscious state and you find yourself unexpectedly in a hospital. You're lying in a hospital bed and you can see that there are tubes in your arms, and in one of the tubes, blood from your body is flowing out, and in the other tube, blood from somewhere else is flowing in. And you look over at the bed next to you, and you see that these tubes that are connected to your body are also connected to a person lying in a bed next to you. But you don't know who this person is or why your blood is flowing into this person's body and their blood is flowing into yours. So after you freak out, you naturally ask the doctors, what's going on? And the doctors say, well, look, we didn't do this. Okay, what happened is this. You were kidnapped by a group called, I think it's called the Society for Musicians. And this Society for Musicians discovered that their beloved virtuoso violinist was suffering from some very fatal, toxic blood disorder and immediately needed to have these toxins filtered out. And they searched the entire globe for the person who was just the right match for this violinist. And lo and behold, unfortunately, you're the special one. You're the one who also possesses these very unique, very peculiar properties in your blood that makes you a perfect match for the violinist. So they went to your house, the Society for Musicians. They clubbed you over the head and they snuck you into the hospital without us knowing. And they hooked you up to the violinist. And now blood from the violinist's body is entering your body and the toxins are being filtered out by your kidneys. And then that blood is being filtered back to the violinist. And what Jarvis Thompson asks us in this scenario is this, is if upon learning this, you ripped those tubes out of your arm and said, I did not consent to this. This was something that was forced upon me. And though it's sad that me disconnecting from the violinist means that the violinist is going to die, I'm not down with continuing to allow this person to use my body in this manner. I didn't consent. And what Jarvis Thompson wants to know is, if you took that position and removed yourself from the violinist and the violinist dies, would you be committing murder? And she's banking that most of us are going to say, well, no. Because it's sad that the violinist is going to die if you disconnect, but you never consented to be the source of the violinist's well-being. You were forced to assume this role. You were forced to have your body used this way. And therefore, you would be morally permitted in disconnecting from the violinist, even though that means the violinist is going to die. Then Jarvis Thompson asks another question. Well, what if you couldn't take those tubes out of your arms yourself? Somehow you were incapacitated and you couldn't disconnect yourself from the violinist. If you asked the doctors to do this for you and they agreed to do it, would they be committing murder? And again, Jarvis Thompson's banking that will say, well, no, because the doctors are freeing you from a situation that you were coerced into, that you were forced into, that you didn't consent to. So they wouldn't be committing murder. They would simply be removing you from a situation that you didn't consent to. Then Jarvis Thompson changes the details just a little bit. She says, okay, well, let's say that you're in the same situation where you wake up and find yourself in this hospital bed, but it's not unexpectedly because you weren't kidnapped. You, in fact, volunteered for this. You volunteered to allow the violinist to use your kidney, use your body as a way of filtering out these toxins in the violinist's blood, thereby saving the violinist's life. And you did this because you believed you could do this very safely. Based on everything that you knew at the moment you entered into this agreement, it seemed like it was safe for you to do so. But lo and behold, we come to find out after you've been hooked up to the violinist and filtering the violinist's blood, that in fact, this poses a serious threat to your own life. That the thinking by the doctors now is that, yes, your kidneys are filtering out some of the toxins, or maybe all of the toxins from the violinist's body, thereby saving the violinist's life. But your body is also absorbing these toxins. And at some point, you're going to find yourself in the same situation as the violinist. And what's going to end up ultimately happening is both you and the violinist will die. And so Jarvis Thompson asks us again, all right, so if your life was being threatened by being hooked up to this violinist, which you voluntarily consented to do, would you be committing murder if you said, I can no longer do this because it's a threat to my life? And again, Jarvis Thompson is banking that we're going to say, well, you wouldn't be doing something that's morally impermissible by doing this. You wouldn't be committing murder by doing this. You're saving your own life. You agreed to do this, but you agreed to do it with the thinking that you were safe in doing so. And now you've discovered that if you continue down this path, you and the violinist are both likely to die. And so you are morally permitted to disconnect from the violinist, even though that means the violinist is going to die. Okay, so Jarvis Thompson draws some preliminary conclusions about your right to life, the violinist's right to life, and how this pertains to abortion from this analogy. One is that because you believe you are morally permitted in disconnecting from this violinist when you are put in a situation that you are coerced into or that is a threat to your life, that sort of signals that you have this right to your life that someone can't co-opt from you and take from you in order to serve another. But of course, another implication here is that the violinist also has a right to life. That we wouldn't be, even though we might be morally permitted to disconnect from the violinist to save our own lives, we wouldn't then be morally permitted to take a shotgun out and kill the violinist. The violinist still has a right to life. They just don't have a right to our life. You have a right to self-defense, right? If this violinist, if you enter into this agreement willingly with the violinist and it becomes a threat to your own life, you have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to defend your right to life by disconnecting from the violinist, even though the unfortunate consequence of that is that the violinist dies. Now, of course, this analogy, Jarvis Thompson is claiming, tells us something about the nature of abortion, right? So what it's telling us is that a fetus, just like the violinist, both of whom Jarvis is accepting is a human being, has a right to life. But that right is not absolute, okay? If that right to life for the violinist or the fetus is one that depends on you being coerced, in other words, kidnapped or assaulted that results in pregnancy, if that fetus's right to life is dependent on you forfeiting your right to life, we've crossed an ethical boundary. Similarly, if you enter willingly into an agreement to let the violinist use your body, or you willingly choose to become pregnant, and the situation changes and becomes a threat to your life, you are morally permitted to disconnect from that violinist. You are morally permitted, Jarvis Thompson says by analogy, to terminate that pregnancy. And what Jarvis Thompson says is that this analogy establishes for us that what she calls the extreme position on abortion, which is abortion is never permitted in any circumstance, is not a viable position on abortion. It's not tenable. That at minimum, we would agree, she thinks, with her, that abortion is morally permissible in cases of rape or in cases where continuing the pregnancy is a direct threat to the life of the mother.